Hello, and welcome back to the Mentor of Life podcast. And today I have with me a rare guest. I don't usually have guests on Mentor of Life podcast, but today I have a guest, and I think, and as I go forward to introduce her, or she introduces herself, you will know why. Now, I have with me today Dr. Otito Okpor, and I'd like you to, Dr. Otito, I'd like you to tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do.
Okay. So as she said, my name is Otito Okpor, and I want to thank you, Dr. Ezekoli, for bringing me on the podcast. I feel like even though we're friends, it's different when you come on, like this. So, educator, researcher of over going on 20 years. So my doctor is from the PhD, right? Also a trained pharmacist. And then 5 years ago, I decided that I needed to kind of understand more about the workplace, human behavior, and all that. So I went back for a degree in organizational psychology. And so, in that vein, right, I think you could say that I'm an organizational psychologist. I also do work in that space, and I am the author of a new book called The Belonging Paradox. And it's a book that kind of straddles the tension, right, between who we are, between us being, our authentic selves and kind of trying to fit in, right, into cultural norms or group norms, in that sense. So yeah, I've been at this work, 5 years now in the psychology space. Although I could say way before that, right? But officially, 5 years ago. So yeah, thank you for having
Wonderful.
me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I always tell people that my
Uh-huh.
friend Otito has more degrees than a thermometer. Just take it like that. She's a brilliant woman, one of the most brilliant minds that I've, ever had the privilege to be associated with. Also, she's one of my best friends. Hello.
Mhm.
So, and we have these conversations all the
Yeah,
time.
all the time.
And one
Yeah.
of the things that, I spoke about was having you on my podcast. I had started to look into how negative experiences
hmm
can actually cause people to change the way they see themselves.
hmm
You know, I was one of those people that thought maybe self-image, well, you could get a better self-image or a worse self-image, but it was largely fixed. But then you watch people, you watch yourself, you look at things and you're like, you know what? If we don't take care, our negative experiences, especially if they become multiple, can
hmm
actually affect the way we see ourselves, and we start to see
hmm
ourselves in a more negative light. I
hmm
wrote about it on I wrote about it in my blog, which we're launching soon. But I also did a podcast on this very topic
hmm
about when life breaks your mirror. So
Yeah.
I'm going to call this "When Life Breaks Your Mirror" Part 2, and
Okay.
invite you to talk about post-traumatic growth. Now,
hmm hmm
post-traumatic growth. I have heard Dr. Tito talk about post-traumatic growth all the time. So
hmm
now I want you to hear it from the boss's mouth. What exactly, Dr. Otito, what exactly is
hmm
post-traumatic growth?
Yeah. So even the name, I think it's almost like a paradox. Like, how do you grow from trauma, right? When you
Mm-hmm.
hear post-traumatic growth. But is this concept, right, psychological concept that sometimes when you go through a very difficult time, one of the things that can come out of it is that you have an increased awareness, right? Empathy for yourself and for other people going through that. So you almost like become a different person, but only because of how you've processed, right, that negative experience, as opposed to allowing it, suck you in or get you down. You're basically saying to yourself, this happened. Yes, it was bad. However, right, there's that however part of it that comes, into the picture where you begin to see, right, all the positive things that kind of came out of that. And, obviously, no one wants to go through a traumatic experience. No one wants to go through a negative experience. But then you realize that, in life, it's not a question of if, but when, right? In
Mm-hmm.
that sense, in that we are all going to go through difficult experiences. Now, difficult experiences obviously differs by the person when you bring in resilience, because what somebody calls difficult may not be so difficult for another person, right? And vice versa.
Yes.
And so that's why, it becomes the kind of growth or the kind of process that comes from you making sense, right, of the thing that you went through, not other people, right? Not other people, or you making sense of other people's experiences for them. Yeah.
Yes. Wonderful. So as a follow-up question,
Hmm.
um, I'm going to ask you how can a person who has
Hmm.
been through a negative experience like that
Hmm.
separate the event from who they are?
Uh, Again, it's this almost like, so in psychology, you talk about this thing of reframing, right? You're looking at the situation almost like from you know, like metacognition. You're kind of looking at the situation, right?
Yes.
And saying, okay, this is this situation, and this was me that kind of, went through it, right? So it's in that almost like relooking, I would say, right, through a different frame or through a different lens that brings, I would say that brings that growth about, right? That's kind of the way I see it. And, I have to say it's not a simple thing. It's, in as much as we say it so easily, because this is a process that could take many years. It's not something that, it
Mhm.
happened and then immediately you reframe it and then you kind of go on, right? It could be, over the years, you start to look back on that incident and say, this was a precipitating incident for where I am today, right? If this
Mm.
hadn't happened, maybe I would not be here today.
Yes.
And this is not to say, how people say, um, it's there's a saying where they say, at least it wasn't X, right? At least it
Mhm.
wasn't Y. No, it's not that. It was X, it was Y. However,
Yes.
there's that however part of it that comes in to say, yes, this happened. However, I can recognize that because of this happening, it's probably why I'm here today.
Mm. You made a very important point in something you just
Hmm.
said. You said it can take years.
Hmm.
This is the thing that we human beings do not want to hear. Because you mean what? You mean it's going to take years to process things.
Yep.
But
Hmm.
I think that the truth is that it's either you take the time to, I would say, bring more self-awareness into
Yep.
yourself, or
Hmm.
just keep living from the result of that trauma and not
Yeah.
ever either get to your goals or live to your full potential, because traumatic experiences make us shrink.
Yep.
They make us
They
shrink. They
do.
made us,
Hmm.
and it gets to a point where we almost can't even see creative
Yep.
solutions because the brain is just in
Yeah.
complete survival mode.
Yep. Survival.
Yes.
Yep.
So,
Fight or flight.
yep. And then for example, someone who's maybe listening to this for the first time is like, oh,
Hmm.
wow, all these traumatic experiences happened to me. Maybe they're in their 40s, even in their 50s.
Hmm.
You know, I think it's important to stress that this is not a one podcast and done situation. This
Hmm.
is you sitting with yourself, reading books, journaling, trying to not trying to make sense of the experience, but trying to
Yeah.
grow from the
From
experience
it. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
building yourself a strong
Yeah.
identity.
Hmm.
Now, how would you say somebody in this sort of phase,
Yeah.
what sort of support should they be engaging?
Hmm.
And the reason I ask that question is because
Hmm.
you've heard the phrase misery loves company.
Yeah.
There are some people that if you tell your problems, they will make your problem 10 times worse. There are some people who will tell
Uh-huh.
you, what's that? That just happened
Hmm.
in the past.
Hmm.
Or they'll say, forget it.
Hmm.
Then, just move on. So how would a person listening to this and hearing something like this for the first time,
Hmm.
how should they engage support?
Hmm. Yeah. So it's interesting because I think that in the society we live in now, people think about support as therapy, right? You
Mm-hmm.
go to therapy or you go to, this kind of contained space. And, it's also a fact that not everyone can afford therapy,
This is
right?
true. Yes.
And so you say to yourself, what if that wasn't? And this is where I think that, going to hear from people who may have gone through the same thing. So this is one of the reasons why support groups exist, right? It's a group of, I wouldn't say like-minded, but people who have gone through some of the same experiences, and you sit with them and you realize, one, this is not unique to me. Two, you know, everybody here is kind of not processing, but they're passing through, right? They are not sitting at home in their beds, right, in some, completely depressed state. They are here to share,
Mhm.
right, to hear from others and to support people.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I don't think sometimes those groups are um almost like put forward enough, because
No.
everyone now talks about therapy, therapy, therapy.
Yeah.
However, if you're going through anything, I'm telling you, there's probably a support group for it in this life, right? So
Yes.
the question is for you to look and say, hey, where can I find people like that? That's one. The other way that you can go through is actually to find a group where you can be of help, right?
Mhm.
And by help, I mean like being a volunteer, doing something where you're kind of almost like releasing, that energy, or not having to think through it all the time. Because the thing
Mhm.
about, the negative experience is sometimes rumination. You keep thinking, sometimes you're like, why did that happen to me? Why didn't I do it? But you keep thinking about things. But when you're in a place where you can almost like give of your, I would say, life energy, you
Mhm.
sometimes find the thing processing itself by itself, right? In that sense, because you're
Mm.
no longer giving it all that frontal lobe or whatever, attention.
Yeah.
And so you're almost like replacing it with other things that are good things. You
Yes.
understand?
Yes.
And I'm emphasizing the good because of what you said, to say there's some people that you should not tell your stories to, right?
Mhm.
Because they don't know how to hold it for you, right? It's almost like, you kind of think about it from, oh, well, you shouldn't bother too much about it. It wasn't that bad. Or, why are you still, grieving, right, about this
Mhm.
situation? Or why are you
Mhm.
still, um, the word complain, which it's a word that I don't really like, because I feel like, people are allowed to complain, right? If
Yeah.
something is a lament, if something is not good, right? A system is not good,
Mhm.
a process is not good, you're allowed to say, this is not good, this is hurting me, right? Or this hurt me.
Indeed.
And I'm not supposed to be the one to tell you, well, you should have hurt you enough, move forward, right? In that sense.
If I love it. Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Ah, thank you very much. So you talked
Mhm.
about, support, and I think
Support, yeah.
different way to think of support by
Hmm.
doing for others, you
Yes.
know.
Yep.
And I too have found that when I'm able to, if I'm going through something, when I'm
Hmm.
able to step out of myself in a
Yep.
pinch and help someone else, it makes me feel good.
Hmm.
Now, I wouldn't do that to take myself completely away from processing
Yes.
what I need to
Like
process
avoidance, right?
or
Using
avoid
it as a,
exactly.
yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
use it to buffer or avoid, but it does help to,
Hmm.
go look after somebody, go
Yep.
pet your cats, go,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like you said, volunteer your time, your
Hmm.
energy, your effort into something that's
Generative,
outside of
something,
yourself.
I call it something generative, right?
Right,
Something that is
right.
building something, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And to your point about support groups, I found over the last few years,
Hmm.
I was a caregiver for my
Yeah.
mother until she
Hmm.
passed, and
Hmm.
I did find support with other people who we call ourselves sandwich generation, who
Yep.
are raising kids as well as taking care of elderly parents. And
Hmm.
it was an online group, but I found them very supportive.
Yeah.
People who listen, people who would understand, and people who wouldn't, you know, because it's all sort of similar situation. People would
Yeah.
say you're complaining too much, or you need to get
Hmm.
over that, or you know what I find in other spaces is, oh, well, count it as a privilege that you could take care of your mother. Yeah, I
Yep.
do count it as a privilege, but
Yeah. But
the space to be able to acknowledge that,
caregiver burnout is real,
yep,
right? It's real. Resentment is real, but not talking about it doesn't take it away. Rather it kind of goes, I would say, deep inside. So
exactly.
there's a woman that I kind of, used to follow, read her books, and I'm telling you, there was something she said that I've never forgotten. And I say to myself, I should actually almost like talk more about this principle. She talks about that everyone should have a wine Wednesday.
Hmm.
Now you hear wine Wednesday, you think is wine. Is wine as
Wine.
in complain. It's like
Wine. Wine.
Just take one day, lament, throw yourself on the ground, throw things, do everything, shout, scream. And then, she's like, the next day, you kind of, continue whatever it is you were doing. But she's like, to think that you can go through things without having one moment of saying, this sucks.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like she said, it's not almost like possible, right,
Yes.
mentally. But
Yes.
then people keep pushing it and wonder why, people don't follow through, right, or kind of give up halfway and all that. Is
Exactly.
because, that's now what people call toxic positivity can only take you so far,
Exactly.
right, in that sense. Because if you're a person who almost like I would say practices that all the time and doesn't give room, right, for expression of, the wine
Angst.
Wednesday,
Uh-huh.
um, as after some time, you start to almost like I think even you start to kind of think about, wow, okay, is this really real, right? In that sense. Now, from a personality point of view, some people are very positive, very optimistic. That's not, the thing that I'm talking about. I'm talking about that sense of, oh, it didn't happen, or if it happened, it wasn't as bad as it was, or so I can just
Mm-hmm.
move on,
Yes,
from
exactly.
something.
Mm-hmm.
But, I feel like traumatic experiences are not things you just sweep under the carpet,
No,
right?
they are not.
Just from the name, it just lets you know this is something that you need to, let out of the system. Now, many ways to let it out, exist. So find the one that works for you, that works for your situation, and that you would be able to do well, right? In that sense. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Wonderful. So, I'd like you to talk about share a little bit about your book. But before I we talk about your book, I want to talk about, and in fact, this is the book I'm reading it right now. Finally got to read it, right? I started reading it.
Yeah.
So, but one final thing I want to bring out from
Mm-hmm.
this conversation, very important.
Mm-hmm.
We people, women, humans, have a very strong tendency for self blame, even when the thing wasn't our fault, right? So I'd like you to speak to that. Like, how do we avoid going back into
Mm-hmm.
I would say rounds of self
Mm-hmm.
blame?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think the thing that comes to mind here for me is compassion, right?
Mm,
I know, when people hear self-compassion, it's like, oh, that psychological thing again. But it's like really sitting to say, okay, that version of me who did that or who went through that, right? That was that person, it's no longer me. And I have, some degree of empathy, right? Or
mm,
compassion
yes,
for that version of me.
yes,
But continuing to go on and say, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. It's almost like, as they say, digging a deeper tunnel for yourself because,
mm,
it's almost like there's no way of seeing the light. But if you're able to say, okay, like I said, that happened, that was a version of me who was, you can even name it, who was more foolish, who was not as wise.
yeah,
But now that's no longer the person that I am. So I can look at that version, right?
mhm,
I don't want to say dispassionately, but you can look at it and say, okay, that happened to, Otito of 2024,
yes,
right? But Otito of 2026 is a woman who's going to, um,
yes,
take from that experience
mm,
and be more mindful, right, as I go forward. For one thing, because I always think the time has passed, you continuing to talk about it or ruminate is taking yourself back into the past. It's like
indeed,
time travel, but backward.
yes,
So why wouldn't you look forward, right? As opposed to continuing to look backward. And honestly, I have to say, this is again, I'm very mindful, from the pragmatic or realistic point of view that this is not an easy thing to do at all. And
no,
I
it's
say
not.
that from somebody who's gone through that, right?
Yes,
Very personally, because I used to be a person who would, ruminate and say, oh, I shouldn't have done that, almost like castigating myself, for my
mm,
mistakes. And it was until I started to practice this to say, okay, the mistake happened.
yes,
Are you going to be able to rewind, the hands of time and redo it?
exactly.
No. So what next, right?
What
What
next?
next?
Mm-hmm.
And just practicing that has helped me very much get out of things really quickly, right? Where I would be like, oh my God, why did I do that, right? Or why did that happen? I'm able to sit and say, okay, this has happened
Happened.
or it's happened.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next thing or what's the next step that I can take, to mitigate whatever,
Whatever it is.
that
Yeah.
was,
Mhm.
right? It's like you go on a stage, you fob your lines, you don't say
Uh-huh.
what you're supposed to say.
Say,
Okay, how can I take that into my next presentation and not try to do that again? And notice what I said, try.
right.
Because
Exactly.
sometimes, it may not be, but just continuing to say, okay, this happened. How do I learn from the experience and take it to the next speaking engagement? So
Yes.
one, that presupposes that I'm gonna have a version of that experience to prove myself again, right? And also because of that, I've put myself in a better state, right? So that when that next experience comes,
Yes.
I can move into it with more grace and
Great.
presence of mind. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so, so very
Mhm.
much. This has been most enlightening. When life
Yeah.
breaks your mirror,
Yep.
post-traumatic growth.
Hmm.
Let's talk about this.
Okay.
Okay. This book is titled The Belonging Paradox
Hmm.
by Dr. Otito. And can you just give us a little plug? We're going to put the link to your book in the
Okay.
show notes and everything. So,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
going to be on my website and my YouTube channel so people can go get it themselves. Can you tell us, just give us like a teaser, a taste?
Okay. So this book is the product of post-traumatic growth. So basically, you're seeing something that
Mm,
is real life, like real life of me taking what was a very negative situation and, kind of processing it, right? And in processing it, I'm a person. That's why I said you kind of, do what works for you, right? So a little bit more intellectual base is who I am. So I kind of
yeah.
went through reading, finding out, just kind of reading, right, from a psychological point of view and seeing, oh, okay, so there's a name, right, for some of these things that I'm going through or some of this,
Mhm.
experiences, right? And I tell you, I don't know, if you're anything like me, once you have a name to something, it's half
Battle.
problem solved,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Once
yes.
you're able to say, oh, so this
This
is the thing, right? Almost like a diagnosis, like those of
diagnosis,
us who are in the medical field.
doctor.
Like getting a diagnosis is half the
Mhm.
problem, right?
Yes,
Just for the person knowing, oh, okay, this is what I have. Like it's not in my mind. I'm not, overthinking it and all that.
exactly.
Allows you to then face and say, oh, is this the course of treatment needed? I'm ready to go through, right? In
Yes.
that sense. So, in my case, it was a question of when you talk about belonging, the paradox. Like you come into the spaces, everyone says, oh, you're welcome, you're this, you're that, you're the best thing since sliced bread, that kind of thing. And then after a while, you notice, I would say, the environment shift, right?
Mm.
And you're thinking, wow, is it me, right? You kind of have that mindset of maybe it's me,
Yes.
maybe it's me, right? It could be in friendship, it could be at work, that kind of thing. And then you start to realize, yes, there's that concept of people say, well, if a situation is happening around you, you are the, common denominator. And I think that my book is trying to counter that, that sometimes you're not the
You're
common
not the
denominator at all.
denominator.
It is just what is happening. You need to recognize it and say, okay, how do I make better friends, right? How do I choose better environments, things like that. And what am I saying is that, remember, this is obviously like a funny thing between us, but when I was saying to you that, how is it that these kinds of people find us, right? Because you kind of, you have these experiences where it's almost like people are taking you for granted or taking advantage of you. And then you realize, wow, okay, there must be something, right, that makes these people find me. And what that thing is probably your essence, your aura, or whatever, right? Like there's something about it that is given, generous, and then they find you. But also, it's also for you to say, okay, well, now that I know that these kinds of people exist,
This,
I'm going to be very mindful next time. I'm going to be able to recognize that thing quickly and
yes,
extricate myself from it, right?
right.
If I keep going through after I've recognized it,
Nice
after the
it, then
diagnosis, then I'm not helping myself. So that's kind
exactly.
of what happened here because,
Mm-hmm.
this as a educated Black woman physician in America, that
Yep.
sometimes, the spaces you enter, it evokes certain responses from people because
True.
they don't expect you to be there, or they don't expect that you will be this, I don't know, educated or whatever. I cannot tell what is in people's minds.
Yeah.
And so what happens is you see those behaviors and then you're like, well, I'm supposed to be here, right? I belong here. And so you kind of put your foot down. And then it looks like it's because you put your foot down that people are being nasty. As opposed to you're putting your foot down because they started the nastiness, right? I'm using the
Mhm.
word nasty, in quotes. And so it's for you to realize, okay, this is just about the people here not being sweet person like me. But that's not going to make me leave this place because I belong here. I belong here because I chose to come in here, right? And I'm here, and you didn't like bring me in here, as patronage. Like it's kind of like, oh, come in,
Yes.
uh-huh.
Yep. Yep.
So
I
and
earned
almost
it.
like I
I
earned,
earned
yes,
my belonging.
exactly,
Exactly.
exactly. See how we're
Exactly.
finishing each other's words,
Yes.
right? Because they common experience. Like I earned the right to be here. And so, that was me kind of thinking through and saying, maybe I can use this experiences to kind of, like I said, shed the light on things like evocation and help people know you're not alone in this thing. Because the
Yes.
worst thing that happens in those kinds of things is thinking you're alone
So
or
yes,
thinking it's something, to do with you, because
that's not
there are
always the case.
sometimes, how we say in Nigeria that everyone can't like you, you're not jollof rice, right?
You're
There's
not taking
sometimes
life.
that no matter what you do, somebody's not going to like you.
And that's
So if you
okay.
keep pushing and pressing and saying this person must like me because I'm here, you're kind of almost like backing up the wrong tree. And so it's to quickly realize that to say, you know, even though people want to behave in ways that I don't belong, I need to recognize that the belonging comes from inside me.
Like me.
So that's kind of the paradox,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Like it comes from you first before
To
it's
create a
something that
sense
people
of
get to give
belonging
to you. Yeah.
for yourself.
Yep. And then you can
Wonderful.
also get to create it for
Wonderful.
other people as opposed to
Exactly.
thinking it's something that comes right from
Mm-hmm.
other people in a space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop
So that,
waiting.
yep.
Stop waiting for your belonging.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
So yeah, so I'm so happy that
Mm-hmm.
we got to do this today. So thank you very, very
You're
much,
welcome.
Dr. Otito. I will, once this episode is out, we'll put your book, the
Thank
link
you
to your book
very
in the show
much.
notes,
Yes.
so that people can get the book themselves. Really great book, The Belonging Paradox. And this episode has been When Life Breaks Your Mirror,
Yes.
Post-Traumatic
Yes.
Growth.
Yes.
Thank you
And
very
I wanted to
much.
add the subtitle of the book is How to Fully Belong, no matter who you are, what you are, or where you are, right? In that sense, because those are the critical things, that is it where I am, who I am, right?
Yes,
Or where or what, right? I am, which speaks to, cultural differences, so many things that make us
exactly.
different, and
Yep.
saying that that shouldn't matter, right?
No,
You can fully belong no matter what.
exactly. And that creating a sense of belonging is,
Hmm.
this is very important.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, my good friend, for always creating a sense of belonging for people around you, right? And for me as well. So I appreciate you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. Bye.